when then can we really talk about the emergence of Islam? When does Islam really appear for the first time as a distinct religion from the matrix of the believers movement? As far as I can tell, this happens towards the end of the 7th century, say in the 690s or early 700s. And it's associated, I think, especially with the person of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, or commander of the believers, or caliph, Abdul Malik, who ruled at that time. What we see is, beginning at this time, is an increased emphasis on the importance of the person of Muhammad himself as the prophet, emphasizing his prophecy, which is something that, let us say, other believers like Christians and Jews might not have accepted so readily. This would have been a problem for them, perhaps. So the emphasis on the Prophet Muhammad and the emphasis on the Quran as the key sacred text were the things that are the kind of the hallmarks of a newly crystallizing sense of Muslims as a separate religious identity or confession, distinct from Christianity and Judaism. And sometime around this time, I think, there's a kind of redefinition of the leading cadres of this community who were of Arabian origin. And they began to say, well, these Christians and Jews who are believers, I'm not sure they're really believers, Now, it's not clear, they have some funny ideas about Jesus being God. It's very hard for us to accept this. And so I think what happens is that it's somewhere around this time, there's a kind of redefinition of the core group in the community as Muslims that defines the Christians and the Jews of the earlier movement out of the movement. So now they're no longer part of the movement, and Islam, as we can call it, becomes a separate religious confession. And I think they begin to focus on the term Islam at this time also as a way of finding a term that's in the Quran that is distinctive for them, the people who follow the Quran. They start downplaying this term believer. They say, well, it means the same thing as Muslim. And they don't date anything any longer using this old formula with the qada al-mu'mineen, the jurisdiction of the believers. They sort of bury that terminology and they start talking about this, well, these are years of the hijrah, years from the time of Muhammad's hijrah or migration. That marks the beginning of our community. So they start renaming or relabeling things, practices and concepts that they had developed in the first 100 years or so in order to make them look distinct from Christianity and Judaism and other religious traditions, and to give themselves a kind of new coherence as a new religious community. So this shift from the believers' movement to Islam is, I think, a really important thing that takes place around the year 700. It's very hard to know. And it's also, I think it was probably led by official decrees and official policies. We see it, for example, in the Dome of the Rock constructed by Abdul Malik and his advisors on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, that beautiful golden building that you know is there. And it has inside it mosaics with inscriptional texts, which are selections of passages from the Quran. And they've selected the passages from the Quran that emphasize the fact that the Trinity is not acceptable. So it sort of seems to be drawing a line between the newly discovered Muslims and Muslims who have sort of really gotten a new sense of themselves, and Christians who believe in a Trinitarian concept, which from the point of view of Muslims, how can three be one? This is not something that they accept. On the other hand, it's also possible that this shift from believers to Muslims was something that was not entirely led by official policy from the top down and trickled down, but where the official policy was responding to a kind of more popular set of changes in popular opinion, that we're realizing that maybe among Christians and Jews, that these Arabian believers really aren't like us and they're somehow different. So in any case, whether it was from the bottom up or top down or simultaneously both, we start to see this process of sort of differentiation whereby Islam and Muslims can really identify themselves as a distinct community, even though they had begun in a much more ecumenical kind of movement that had a lot involved Christians and Jews, let's say, in the original foundational efforts. Well, of course, all of this means that when today or any period in the past we look at what is Islam, how is it constructed, and people always want to go back to the beginnings to see what something is about, right? Well, if you go back to the beginnings, as far as I can tell, you're going to find something really quite different. And it opens all kinds of, it creates problems sometimes for people in interpretive terms, especially for Muslims, but it also opens up all kinds of opportunities, I think, of creative reinterpretation of sort of how Muslims should behave today. Of course, as you probably know, one of the things about Islam today, and really ever since the time of the Prophet Muhammad, is that there's no single authoritative source for what Muslim doctrine should be. It's not like the Catholic Church where, you know, the Pope makes a decree or an encyclical or something, and that's doctrine, and Catholics have to follow it. There's no such thing in Islam. There's no Pope in the Islamic tradition. There are lots of very learned people. Historically, were lots of different people who were very learned, but of course they disagreed about all kinds of things. And so you had different opinions. It was sort of the battle of intellectuals in the community, and whichever one seemed to be the most persuasive or important was the one that held sway, but different ones were always favored in different places. So there's no single Islam today, and nor has there been for centuries. And so a reinterpretation of the origins, of course, then provides even more scope for all kinds of flexible new possibilities for how Muslims might engage with the world around them today. I think I've talked long enough, and if you have any questions, we can entertain them. Thank you.